Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today. Today's webinar is on the leadership team tools and reports. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a deep dive into BNI Connect and take a look at some of the things that most leadership teams would access on a fairly regular basis. Things like how to enter a POMS report, or how to enter the speaker rotation, or how to assign a mentor and a mentee in BNI Connect, as well as look at some of the reports. How can we get statistics back about the chapter, such as the summary POMS report, or find out when members are due for renewal using the membership dues report, or how to help members generate more referrals in the chapter using the meeting notes report. So all of these things we're going to talk about in today's webinar. Couple of housekeeping things before we get started. First of which is that this is a live webinar. So that means that if you have any questions as we're going through the material today, please feel free to ask those questions. I'll be happy to answer them as we go along. All you need to do is to type your question in to the questions panel. I'll see it pop up on my screen and I can answer it at that particular time. If it's something completely and totally unrelated to what we're talking about, I will reserve plenty of time at the end of today's session to answer all of your questions. Most of these webinars are about a half hour. This one's a little bit different. This one we're going to go closer to the hour mark, and that's just because we have a lot of stuff to cover today. That being said, even though the content's going to be about that 45 minutes to an hour, I am always happy to stay on these calls until every single question is answered. Just as an example, we had a 60-minute webinar with a different audience on Friday that ended up going an hour and 45 minutes just because they had a lot of questions. And again, I'm happy to stay on as long as you have questions until every single one has been answered. We're also going to be recording this session. So if there is another person on your leadership team that couldn't make it today, but you'd like them to be able to utilize this content, you will be able to share it with them. You can find the recording in two places, the first of which is on the support site. If you click on this question mark in the upper right-hand corner when you're logged into BNI Connect, that will take you to the support site. And once you get there, you'll see all of our upcoming webinars listed, and you'll also see links to the recordings. If you click on one of the recording links, this will have all of the webinars. All of them up through last Friday have been uploaded. And this one from today I'll have uploaded usually within 24 to 48 hours. And I'll also have the remaining two up after those happen, both tomorrow for chapter web pages and Wednesday for the online renewals. And then we'll do this whole series again live in April. You can also find all of our recordings up on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/BNI Connect Global, youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. You can find every webinar we've ever done up here, as well as other videos such as short education moments. So please do check out our YouTube channel if you'd like to be notified when new videos are uploaded. Just subscribe to the channel. All right, but let's take a look at today's content. And again, today we're going to be talking about the leadership team tools and reports. Now, before I go too deep into this, I just want to give you kind of a little bit of a caveat before we get started. And that is that we are a very large organization with about 200,000 members and admins and directors around the world, in about 7,000 chapters around the world in about 1,000 different regions. Now, with that said, there's a lot of different ways that regions do things. Now, the technology is the same, regardless of what position is performing the task. Generally speaking, when it comes to permissions and security and how BNI Connect is set up, most of the time, anybody on the leadership team can perform any of the leadership functions. For example, entering the POMS report. That is something that is usually done by the vice president. However, it's not always done by the vice president. The vice president usually has a ton of responsibilities, such as running the membership committee and having all those membership committee meetings and working to resolve disputes and all of that stuff. And then the PALMS report sometimes is delegated to another position to take care of that. And that's all possible within BNI Connect. And I'd say, 80% of the vice presidents out there, they do the PALMS report, and 20% of the people out there may have some other position doing it. Same thing for, usually it's the secretary treasurer that enters the speaker rotation. But again, sometimes that is delegated as well. So when I'm talking about certain things that are happening, I may say, okay, and now the vice president goes in and submits the PALMS report. If you happen to be in one of those regions where somebody else has been designated to do that task, that's okay. The process is still going to be the same. It still gets entered the same way. The other reason that we tend to teach everybody all of these things, for example, let's say that you're a president on the line with us today. Now, it may not be your weekly responsibility to go in and do the PALMS report. However, what happens when your vice president goes on vacation for 2 weeks or is sick for 3 weeks or whatever it might be and they're out of the chapter? It helps to have somebody be able to back the other person up with some of these tasks. So the vice president may be out for a couple of weeks. That doesn't mean the PALMS reports have to stop being submitted. You can just go in and take over that task for a couple of weeks until the vice president comes back. All right, so with those things being said, let's go ahead and get started. Now, a couple of things I just want to make very, very clear. Before we even get beyond the home page here, one thing that leadership teams are asked about constantly, especially the vice presidents being the numbers people in the chapter, they're constantly being asked about this My BNI Business Report, which is right here on the home screen in BNI Connect. So the My BNI Business Report, let me just explain how this report works. This report is taken from the PALMS. So the PALMS, for anybody that isn't sure what that is, PALMS is the attendance report, and it's also the statistics report. PALMS stands for present, absent, late medical substitute. It also measures and tracks all of the referrals and one-to-ones and things like that. This My BNI Business Report is taken directly from those PALMS reports for your chapter. And all it does, it takes the member that's logged in, so myself in this case, it takes my statistics out of the PALMS report and it gives me a summary of my activity for the last 12 months and also my lifetime. And I've been in BNI since 2002. So this is pulling all of my statistics going all the way back to 2002. Now, yes, that time did predate BNI Connect. So it doesn't matter whether you're using online slips or whether you're using a different system before, it should still pull all of your data going back to when you first started BNI. The other thing about this is that it only pulls the official statistics. The other important thing that's on the home page here is all of the ability for a member to submit their slips on a weekly basis through BNI Connect, so they can do that all electronically. Now that's great. It takes a huge burden off of the vice president or whoever's entering the PALMS reports. And it also means that they don't have to wait until the weekly meeting in order to start filling out paper slips. They can do it right away as referrals are happening. So when they go and they submit a slip, for example, they submit a referral and they fill out this referral and they send that referral off to somebody, what happens is that slip goes into a kind of a virtual basket for that upcoming meeting. So members, when they submit slips like that, they're kind of expecting, they say, oh, well, I just submitted a referral. How come my referrals given didn't jump from 41 to 42? Well, that's because your meeting hasn't happened yet, and only after the meeting happens and that PALMS report has been officially submitted with the attendance will these My BNI business numbers change. So that's a question we do get all of the time is, hey, I just submitted 5 referrals. How come the numbers didn't go up? Well, again, because it only happens after your meeting. However, as soon as they submit any slips here, they will appear immediately in all of these reports. For example, the Review My One-to-One report will immediately show any one-to-one slips that I've submitted. However, until the meeting happens, they will say that they're in draft mode. Once they've gone to completed, meaning the VP or whoever has submitted the PALMS report, only then will they be counted in the My BNI business. Now, the other thing that I get asked about all the time is members say, well, those numbers just don't seem right. I had more one-to-ones than that last year, or I wasn't absent 3 times, or whatever else it might be. There's a great way to troubleshoot that with people in your chapter just by clicking on this report right here. It's called the My Personal Participation Report, and the link is right next to My BNI Business. Now, if I click on the My Personal Participation Report, this is a really powerful report for members because it shows them week by week for the past year exactly what they've been credited for. And again, this is whether they're using electronic slips or whether they're using the paper slips in the meeting. This has all of that activity. So they can very easily see week by week. So if they say, here's a common thing that happens. All of a sudden, a member has 6,000 one-to-ones. Well, how can somebody have 6,000 one-to-ones? More than likely what happened is that whoever was entering the POMS report made a mistake. So they were entering all the information in, and instead of putting 6,000 into thank you for closed business, they accidentally put it into the one-to-one column. Here's an easy way to figure out where that error happened. You can see exactly which week it may have happened on, and at that point you can go back and make the correction. So again, if somebody is having trouble or struggling or saying that their numbers just aren't right, have them print out a copy of this report and you can review it with them to find out where the error might be. It'll also show the number of members sponsored as well as any training that they've attended during that 12-month period. All right, before we move on to go a little bit deeper into BNI Connect, does anybody have any questions about the online slips or about the My Personal Participation Report? And again, I didn't go too far into the online slips. We do have a whole webinar, 30-minute webinar dedicated just to the online slips program. So I wanted to focus more on some of the back-end functionality with you guys today. All right, so if nobody has any questions about the online slips or anything on the home page here, now let's take, oh, hold on a second. Tom says, yes, I have a question. Hold on a second. Marie also has a question. Sure. All right, let's see. Carol says, with any of the slips are reported, does the VP see these so that they are not repeated? Absolutely, Carol. I will show you that in just a second. There's a special report just for VPs where you can see all of the weekly activity that was passed by all of your members, and it's called the Slips Audit Report, and essentially it is your audit log to compare the paper slips that might have been passed in versus the electronic slips and what is entered into the POMS report. So I will absolutely show that to you, Carol. All right, Tom, Marie, you guys said you had a question? All right, so Tom says, if we enter our own thank you for closed business, will it keep? He said, sorry, I'm a slow typer. Not a big deal, Tom. So if you enter your own thank you for closed business, what happens is that it will get input into the POMS report. So let's say that I had a thank you for closed business for somebody in my chapter. So I would submit a thank you for closed business slip. I would thank the other person in my chapter for the referral in the amount of, let's say, $150. And this was, let's say, repeat business, and it was an outside referral. I can put whatever comments I want in here. And I can submit this. Now, once I submit this, what will happen is, again, this goes into the temporary report for this upcoming week. We meet on Thursdays. It did immediately go into review my thank you for closed business slip here. So I can see that it was successfully input, and it's a draft because the meeting hasn't happened yet. Now, once the meeting happens this week and my VP goes in and submits all the information, then not only will David get that credit in the POMS report on his profile, but up here, this revenue received to my business, this number will go from 499,370 to 499 whatever, 520. So this number will increment at that point by $150. And by the way, this revenue received, that only increments by putting in thank you for closed business slips online. All right, does that make sense, Tom? So yes, it will be recorded as money you make over the course of the year. All right, so that answers your question. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Let's see. Marie says, I've been noticing that many of my referrals and one-to-ones don't come off my page for a couple of weeks. Is that because my VP hasn't done the POMs? And that is correct. So if they're still showing up in draft, it means that they have not done the POMs report. And that is kind of the one negative thing with online slips, is that if your whole chapter is doing online slips, the only thing that you as the VP has to do is to go in and mark attendance and submit, because there's no paper slips that you have to keep track of. It's all done automatically and electronically. Some VPs tend to get a little lazy now because, well, I just have to put the attendance in, so they let it stack up for a week or two, which they should not do, but I do find that happening. So that is something to keep a lookout for. Does that make sense, Marie? By the way, this isn't a temp report. So that Marie says, why do they stay on my temp page? This isn't a temporary report. So to review my referral slips, I can actually go back to when I first started passing slips. And this is one of the great powerful things about this report. This is not a temporary report. This actually will show me every single referral I've ever passed, so I can go back and review all of those details. It's only temporary because it might say draft because it hasn't been submitted yet, but it will always be on this report. It'll just be temporarily in draft mode. Does that make sense, Marie? So I apologize if that was confusing. But only if you enter it online. Yes, so only if the members are submitting their own slips will they appear in the Review My Slips report, as well as with all the detail. If they're handing in paper slips, the only thing that they can see is the number that happens in the POM. All right. All right, so any other quick questions before we move on from the home page? All right, and that's why some of these webinars tend to be about an hour or longer, because you guys have great questions, and I love questions, so it's great to be able to take this opportunity to answer them now rather than having you guys scratch your heads later on. So, all right, so now in order to do some of this other stuff in BNI Connect, we are going to have to go beyond the home page here. That's one of your leadership team responsibilities, is you're going to have to put on a brave face and venture beyond the home screen. Now, most of the stuff that you're going to do is going to be under these menu items here: network, operations, and reports. And most of the time, from a leadership perspective, it's going to be under operations and reports. If you're not sure where to go for something, most of the time you're going to be, if you need to do data input, you're going to go to operations. Operations is the day-to-day management for your chapter. So it's, if you ever need to put anything into BNI Connect, it's always going to be under operations. If you're looking for statistics, it'll be under reports. Reports are read only, so you can never put anything into reports. You can only get information back out of reports. Operations is input. Network is social media stuff. So it's really the, how to connect with people and give testimonials and things like that. So let's go first to the operations menu and take a look at what's under operations. So if I go to operations chapter, this will bring me into all of the different things that I have access to. While we're on the subject of access, for some of you guys that may be stepping into a leadership team in April, on April 1st, in just about, 10 days or so from now, You may not see all of these options yet. That's because you're not officially the president or vice president or secretary treasurer or something yet. Once that happens at midnight on April 1st, you guys will get magically all of this access, and you'll get all of the information, access to these functions once that happens. All right, so don't panic if you can't do anything now. You will have that access in about a week. All right. If you don't, if it's April 2nd comes around and you're like, oh, I still can't get in to do any of this, then just call your regional office, talk to your director consultant or your regional admin or your executive director, and they can help you out and give you the access you need. All right, so that said, on the left-hand side, you'll see a bunch of different areas that we can work with. We have visitors, we have meeting management, working with the actual meeting, managing memberships. This is where we can work with adding new applications and things like that. We have the goal setting program. I do a whole webinar on this, so I'm not really going to touch upon this today, managing goals. We have the mentoring program where we can view and assign mentors. There's a couple of different options under create email. And finally, we have managing the news, which is a special function having to do with the chapter website. Also not something I'm going to touch upon today. So going through some of these things, some of the things that you might need access to right away that you will be working on under create email. One of the things that leadership teams need to do a lot is they need to communicate with their chapter. So let's say that you're going to be having an after hours for your chapter, and you need to get a message out to everybody just reminding them of that. Now, before BNI Connect, I used to always have to go in and just hit reply all to whatever the last message was to my group. Very inconvenient and often just wrong way to do it because it didn't have half of the people on it, or people that were getting it were no longer part of the chapter and they didn't want to get those messages anymore. So all you need to do is go to create email and go email my chapter. And if you click on email my chapter, this will always give you the most current email address list for your chapter. All you need to do is to highlight these, hit Control-C for copy, and drop them into the BCC line of your own email program. So Gmail, or I happen to use Outlook, or whatever email program you use. And once you do that, you send it out. Now you can be sure that it's all going to the same people. Just a note, please do put that into the BCC line. The rest of your chapter will appreciate that. It'll cut down on the number of reply alls, as well as if it does get forwarded, that whole email address list isn't out there in the public. All right, there's also another great tool in here for emailing a visitor invitation if you've never seen this before. It's a great way to have anybody in the chapter be able to send an invitation out to a potential visitor. I find that a lot of members in the chapter, they struggle with what to say about BNI when they're inviting somebody, and this kind of takes that guesswork away from it. So they can go in and they can send out an invitation. Now keep in mind, we are not a spam organization or a cold call organization. So this is good as kind of a second meeting request. So if you meet somebody at a networking event, for example, and say, hey, I'd love to invite you to my chapter. Can I send you more information? This is a great way to do that. So all you need to do is put in somebody's name. So let's say John Smith here from Smith Co. And I'm going to use my own email address here. And then add a personal message. The personal message is going to be the first paragraph of this particular invitation. So it was great meeting you at the chamber event. I would love to introduce you to my chapter. I click send and it sends out a nice invitation, and it's branded, it's great looking, got some BNI graphics in there, as well as all of the information about your chapter. So that should go through to my email in just a second here. And there is the invitation. So if you'd like to test this out, just go ahead and send one to your own email address. Just send one to yourself. Just a great way to get a nice quick invitation out there. All right, so let's go look at some of the other things. One of the responsibilities of usually, let's say, a visitor host is that they are going to then work with the visitors that are coming to the chapter, both before and after. And this is actually something that a visitor host can do, or anybody in the chapter can also register their own visitors before a meeting. So this function is under Manage Visitors. And before a meeting, a great idea is to please pre-register a prospective visitor for the upcoming meeting. So here it says register a prospective visitor before a meeting. Now this is great because it helps visitors to, well, show up to the meeting, because it changes it from a casual invitation to now an RSVP. You are now registered to visit the meeting, which means more of the visitors are showing up. So you can do this by clicking on Register a Prospective Visitor, and all you need to do is fill out the form. Choose the profession and the specialty, fill out their name, John Smith from Smith Co., 1 Here Street, and the rest of the information. The great thing about having your chapter members do this is that it will make it a lot easier for your visitor hosts or for your secretary treasurers if they're the ones that are doing the visitor recording. When members register their own visitors, all that a visitor host will have to do afterwards is mark that visitor as having shown up to the meeting. Now, I'm not going to submit one because this will alert my chapter that a visitor is coming. So I don't quite want to freak out my leadership team that John Smith will be showing up tomorrow. But that's one of the great things about that registration, is that it will send a confirmation to the visitor. It'll also send a notice to the president, the vice president, the secretary treasurer, all of the visitor hosts, and the director consultant that a visitor will be coming to next week's meeting. That is some great information to know as somebody on the leadership team. That's some information that you can use to, I don't know, give that visitor a call. Welcome them to that meeting before they even get there. Let them know that you're looking to introduce them to somebody. All ways to make that visitor feel welcome before they even come through to the meeting. Now, the other benefit of it is that once you've registered the visitors, the thing that happens after the meeting is that we should be recording our visitors. And there's a bunch of reasons why we do that. The first of which is that then the member or the visitor gets a thank you saying, thank you for coming to the meeting. It also will give credit to the person that invited them in the PALMS report for that week. So they get a 1 in their visitor column. It also just helps to build up your visitor database. So later on, you can use this as a resource for your chapter, either to re-invite visitors back, or maybe you're doing a business after hours and you'd like to invite all the visitors that have come to the chapter in the last 6 months to come to this after hours event. You can do that once you've started developing a visitors database. Now, for visitor hosts, or in some cases secretary treasurers, after a meeting has happened, what you really want to do is go in and manage registered visitors. And hopefully, if your visitor was pre-registered to the meeting and they showed up, all you have to do is go in and click Edit, mark the visitor as attended, and at that point you can choose to add them to the PALMS report. Now, you can uncheck this in order to not add them to the PALMS report. There's some legitimate reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. One would be as if they're not an eligible visitor. For example, if they are a member of another chapter, or they're just a guest that week, or they're a substitute or something like that. You really don't want to add them to the PALMS report at all. If it's their second or third or fourth visit, you don't really want to add them into the PALMS report the second or the third or the fourth time that they've been to the meeting. The reason for that is that a lot of regions use what's called the chapter traffic lights. One of the stats in the chapter traffic lights is conversion ratio, which is the number of new members you've had in the last month divided by the number of visitors as per the PALMS report. So if you're putting the same person in 2 or 3 or 4 times into the PALMS report as a visitor, that means that your conversion rate is going to be terrible. So keep it honest and you can have a better conversion rate. And again, if they were pre-registered and the person has filled out all the information already, this is a lot easier. You just have to verify the person that invited them, because that's the person that will get credit in the POMS report. And you choose whether or not to send a follow-up email. Once I click submit, this will be passed to the POMS report in order to add that credit. If the person is not in this list, so they are not pre-registered for the meeting, you can still click on add visitor and add somebody from scratch that was not pre-registered. Same form, same process. All right. So that's visitors. I do have another webinar that goes really deep into visitors and the whole inviting and registration process. You're welcome to check that webinar out next month or to check out the recording for that. But any quick questions on visitors before we move on to some of the things in the meeting management? Let's see. Tracy asks about the sample of the registered visitor. Sure, absolutely. Let me see if I can pull that up for you real quick. So here is, let's see. Well, here's a sample of the reminder. So I'm actually registered to visit the Burr chapter on Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. This is to remind you that you're registered. If you have any questions, et cetera, it has all the information in it. So that's a sample of the reminder. The registration message is very similar in format and details. So does that help, Tracy? Al says, is the conversion rate of the last monthly average or the rolling 6 months? Al, it's for the previous 6 months of the report that you're pulling. So if I'm looking at, basically the March traffic light report, that's for the previous 6 months. So if I was looking at the traffic light report for January, it would be for, July through December. All right, so does that make sense, Al? So it's for the previous 6-month period from when the report was run. Tom says, can we as directors register to attend the chapter meeting but select to not be part of the POMS? Yes, you can register yourself as a visitor for the chapter meeting. What I would say to you is to not, you're going to have to train your visitor host to not put it in as put it in for POMS entry, though, when they record that visit, unless you go in and record the visit yourself. Does that make sense, Tom? So you'd have to train your chapters really to help with that. Marie says, where do we find the traffic lights report? I will show you that in just a couple of minutes when we get to the reports section. All right. Marie says, can non-leadership team members use the management page regarding visitors? So when a member logs into the system, what they're going to see is they're only going to see this link here, this register a prospective visitor. They won't see the other 3 options. But yes, any member can register their own prospective visitor. They can also do it from your chapter website as well. All right, so hopefully that helps. Let's see, Susanna says, when entering a visitor, an email is sent. Can it show who invited the guest? Susanna, right now we don't have a variable for the invitee, the person that invited the guest. That's definitely something on the list for hopefully a future enhancement. So, but unfortunately, it's not available at this time. All right. Cool, so I think we're good with visitors. Let me move on to the meeting management portion of this. There's a couple of things under meeting management that you're going to want to do. This one's big on the data people, so that really the vice presidents are going to be in here every single week. So part of your responsibility is, after every chapter meeting, what you need to do is go in and record the POMS report for that week's meeting. Now, I'll tell you this, if your chapter is doing the online slips, This job is wicked easy. If your chapter is still using paper slips, this job takes a long time. So I do encourage you to encourage your chapter to use the online slips. Here's why. So on a weekly basis, what you do is you go to Meeting Management and then click on Enter POMs. So let's say that I'm the vice president of my chapter. We had our meeting last Thursday. And I'm going to go in and click on Enter POMs. Now, the first thing that I'm shown is I need to verify the visitors for credit in the POMs report. So for all of the registered visitors or the new visitors that the visitor host went in and said, yep, give this person credit for this visitor, give this person credit for this visitor, that will be presented to me and it will let me know who entered the visitor, who is going to get credit for inviting them, and the name of the visitor. At this point, I just need to say yes or no. Do I agree that Phil should get credit for inviting Kathy? Do I agree that Ken Neff should get credit for inviting Linda? Again, I can choose yes or no. If I'd like to review the POMs report, I can click on the link here. This will put it into the appropriate report. So even if somebody had entered a visitor from 3 weeks ago and they just entered that in, today, it would put it into the appropriate POMs report. All right, so once I've made those decisions, it will take me on and I can choose when I want to enter my POMs report for. So let's say I do want to enter it for last week's meeting, and I click on Enter POMs. Now, my chapter is paperless, so to speak. We do all of our activity through the online slips. So as a vice president, all I need to do is go in and review this information and mark the attendance for last week's meeting. But essentially, this is just a giant spreadsheet. So here on the POMs, and remember, POM stands for present, absent, late, medical, substitute. So I would choose that for each of the members. Because we're using online slips, this is all filled out for me. If you're using paper slips, what that means is you are going to have to count out all of the slips. So for example, let's say that Christy had a referral for Brad. I would put a referral given into the RGO column. I'd put a referral received into the RRO column, and I would increment those numbers. By the way, if you're not sure what all these acronyms mean, RGI and RGO, RG stands for referrals given. So that is the giver side of the relationship. I stands for inside and O stands for outside. An inside referral means one member used another member's services. All right, so if Christy used Brad's services directly, that would be an inside referral. An outside referral is if Christy introduced anybody else that she knows. It could be her daughter, it could be her neighbor, it could be her best friend's uncle's cousin. It doesn't matter what it is. If she's referring somebody else to Brad for his services, that's an outside referral. So RGI and RGO, and then it has the corresponding referral recipient. Referral received inside and referral received outside. So every referral should have the two sides to that relationship. V stands for visitors. One-to-ones are one-to-one meetings between two members. Thank you for closed business is TYFCB, and CEUs, which you do have to scroll over for, by the way. CEUs, those are chapter education units. All right, and again, all you need to do is to fill out this report. If you'd like to keep any notes or remarks about the meeting, you can do that, and then you choose one of these at the bottom. Submit POMs means I am satisfied with what I have on this piece of paper. I'm going to finalize these numbers. It submits it, becomes part of the official chapter statistics. The My BNI Business Report is updated. The summary POMs reports are updated. All of the traffic lights and all of that, those are all updated with these statistics. Until you click submit, this is not part of it. You do have a couple of other options down here. Mark as holiday. Even if your chapter doesn't meet for a week, it is very important that you go in and you mark that week as a holiday. So for example, we meet on Thursdays. We don't meet on Thanksgiving because that falls on a Thursday. So if we don't have a meeting that week, the VP still needs to go into that week's meeting, mark it as a holiday. The reason for that is it closes that meeting. So it doesn't count towards the statistics. It also takes any slips that may have been entered electronically and pushes those to the next week's meeting. So they'll all flow into the week after Thanksgiving. Same thing for like Christmas and New Year's and any other holidays that you might celebrate. You always have to go in and mark it as a holiday. Save as draft means that, I don't know, I'm not done with it yet. I'm counting up paper slips. I just got a call from a really important client. I've got to take this call. You can save it as a draft and come back to it later. Note that BNI Connect does have a 30-minute timeout. So that means that if there's no activity on the screen for 30 minutes, it will log you out of the system. So it'll give you a 5-minute countdown timer and all that kind of stuff. But if you walked away from your computer and you come back to it, your information will be lost if it hadn't been saved as a draft. Discard means I want to throw this report away and start all over again. Keep in mind that when you discard it, if there's any online slips, it will bring them all back. Those are saved for you. However, anything that you put in manually, like paper slips or the attendance, that would be lost. All right. Tom says, I learned that one the hard way. I'm assuming you meant you walked away from your computer and you lost a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah, he's lost all the stats before. So definitely save it as a draft if you think you're going to be walking away. All right. Now, as far as the question before from Carol said, with any of the slips that are reported, does the VP see these so that they're not repeated? So up here, you have a couple of buttons. You have show visitors, that'll show any visitors that were entered. And then you also have the slips audit report. If you click slips audit report, this will give you all of the online slips that were passed for that week's meeting. So all of the slips that were attributed to this particular meeting. So we can see, for example, Christine Donardi had a referral to Jeremy Von Flattern. It was a referral. It was a tier 2 referral. We can see that Colin had a one-to-one with Shannon Cuthill. We can even see the stuff that was done cross-chapter. So we can see Alyssa Baldessari had a referral for Elizabeth Berman. She is in the BNI Business Exchange chapter. So again, these are only the ones that were entered online by the members. So these are all the ones that they entered their own slips on the home page. It does capture the details and it shares them with you. For any paper slips, all you're doing is putting the number into the report. You will notice that thank you for closed business is one-sided. You can only see the person being thanked. You can't see the person that put in the thank you for closed business or that made the money. That is for compliance and privacy reasons. We cannot share that information. So the only way to find out is to ask a person if they submitted that or when they announce it at the meeting. All right, when you're all set, again, you can make any remarks about the meeting and finally submit that POMS. Now, again, I'm not going to do that because this is my own personal chapter and I don't want to mess up my VP's statistics for the week. All right, so the other option in here is, let's say that you need to go back and correct a POMS report in the past, make adjustments to them, or somebody, you marked them as absent and they really had a substitute there, or something like that. You can do that by going to view the POMS summary, and you can view any individual POMS report back to the history of when the chapter started keeping POMS reports. So let's say that a member calls up and they said, hey, you marked me as absent 3 weeks ago, and I had a substitute there and I verified that the substitute did show up, so how come you didn't mark me? Okay, well, I can go back to the report, let's say from February 18th, click on view reports. It'll show me all of the reports up to that time and their status. Their status is either going to be completed or holiday or draft mode. Now keep in mind there is a draft, you notice, for this week's meeting. So what that's going to contain is all of the online slips that have been passed so far. So I can even go in and check out the activity that's happening throughout the week and who's passing referrals. But anyway, I could go back to any of these completed meetings and click on the word completed. That will bring me into that meeting. Let's say that Shannon here said that he wasn't absent that week. I can go in. I can unlock the POMS. That will allow me to go in and edit it. And then I go in and save it again. Okay? And that, my friends, is the PALMS report. All right, we have a couple of questions here. So Carol, that answered your question about the slips. Tom said only the ones online. Yes. Tom says, how does a draft get saved? So the draft gets saved when you submit that PALMS report. So when I go to enter and I go to enter the PALMS report for that week, or you can always go into the PALMS summary, you can view them. All right, I'm going to go ahead and view reports here. I can click on the word draft. That will bring me into the draft PALMS report. I could click on edit the PALMS. It's going to force me to make the decision now on the visitors. And then once I click submit, then that report will be closed out. And it's a draft because it's just the temporary report for the week while it's collecting all of these slips that are being passed. All right, you only get a draft like that when your chapter is using the online slips. Does that make sense, Tom? All right. Marie says, how do we make our members submit all of their slips information through BNI Connect rather than on paper? Our chapter is hesitant to make and stand behind a decision. That one I would talk to your executive director about as far as a strategy. I know in my personal chapter, the way we did it was when it was at a leadership team transition, and the incoming leadership team said, listen, we're not going to spend an hour every week counting out all the slips, so you need to enter it online in BNI Connect. And they stood up, they said that, and we never looked back. Shortly thereafter, our region made the decision to do that as well. So now our entire region is passing it. We just have a mantra that says, if it's not entered, if you don't enter it into BNI Connect, then it didn't happen. And we had some people that were reluctant at first, and we did notice our stats drop a little bit for a short period of time. But I can tell you that a couple of people that were coming up for renewal, that we went to do their membership review with them, and they had no referrals passed and no thank you for closed business and no anything. They panicked a little bit, and at the last minute they went ahead and put them in. So but it is different strategies for each chapter. I don't know your personal chapter and what their personality is. Talk to your director consultant, talk to your executive director, and they can help you out with that. All right, Marie, does that help? Tom says sometimes they also use that for door prize drawings and things like that. So for example, only taking a door prize from slips that were submitted online. All right. So just a couple more things under the operations menu that you'll be doing on a semi-regular basis. Going back to the meeting managements, and now this is something that really mostly the secretary treasurer usually does, is they go in and they edit the speaker rotation. So if I go into view edit speakers, what this does is it allows you to put in your next 6 to 8 weeks worth of speakers. So I can go in, if I want to see who's going to be the upcoming speakers, I can go in and choose a date, and I can view all of the upcoming speakers. My chapter has close to 50 members, so we do 2 every week. So we can list both of those speakers. So we can see here we have, on 3/3, Kelly and Ken spoke. And then this week we have Colin and Brian that'll be speaking. And I can see I have my 10-minute presentation coming up on the 14th. So this allows you to schedule those speakers out. Now, I don't recommend going more than 6 or 8 weeks out. If you want to assign a speaker, just go ahead and click Assign Speaker. Choose a date that they're going to be speaking. Notice it'll only allow you to choose your meeting days. I can choose who's going to be speaking that day and enter the topic. One thing that you'll notice is there will be some people in here that are not members of your chapter. For example, when I get asked about all the time is, who's Elise Wilson? How come she's in my speaker list? All of your regional executive directors and director consultants and even our national director will be in this list of speakers. Now, Elise Wilson, she's our national director here in the United States. It's very unlikely she will be a speaker at your chapter in the near future. However, think about BNI as a global organization. There's a lot of countries out there that are just starting up that might only have 5, 6, 10 chapters in the whole country. The national directors are very involved still in visiting chapters on a regular basis, so this gives the flexibility for them to be chosen as speakers for those chapters. The nice thing about this is that the chapters will get, Elise or whoever you choose as a speaker, will get a reminder that they're speaking 6 days before the meeting as well as 3 days before the meeting. The Secretary Treasurer also gets a reminder, so they're reminded to go and make sure that they get a bio for that member. The other added benefit is it will list the speakers on your chapter website as well. One thing to keep in mind is that you can't shift speakers around. So if somebody cancels, you can delete them and put a new speaker in their place, but you can't just move everybody up a week. That is something that we actually don't recommend doing anyway, because it really does mess up people's schedules. For example, I've already hard-coded in my calendar that I'm speaking on, April 14th. If all of a sudden they just move me up a week and I don't happen to hear them announce that at the meeting and I'm actually traveling to the national conference the following week, that will mess with my schedule. So we don't recommend just shifting everybody, but rather finding somebody else that can go into that spot. Marie says, how do you keep track of who just had a turn and who should have a turn sooner? Usually we do that. I keep that on a separate sheet. You can look back as far as you want to in meeting management. So if I go to view edit speakers, I can go back and view this report for any length of time I want to. And I can see all of the speakers. It looks like they started putting these in. Yeah, that's about right, 2011. And I can see all the speakers that had various turns. There is also a speaker report that I'll show you when we get over to the reports section. Marie says, isn't there a way to publish a list showing who hasn't had a turn in a while? At this time, there's not. So yes, it is a manual process right now. That's another thing that's on our list of suggestions for hopefully a future release. All right, does that help, Marie? I can show you the report when we get over to them in just a moment. All right, the final thing, again, I have a whole webinar on managing goals, so I'm not going to touch that one today. But the final thing is the mentoring program, and really this works the exact same way kind of as the speaker rotation. I can go in and I can view any mentor and mentees. Now the mentoring program is basically, it's a way to jumpstart new members in your chapter. And what it does is it assigns a seasoned member with the new member. And for a period of 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how your region has it structured, they will get a weekly email saying, hey, you guys need to have a one-to-one this week, and this is what you need to talk about. Talk about how to do better one-to-ones, how to get registered for a member success program. Here's your structure for a 10-minute presentation. So it's kind of a, it's a mentoring, a coaching meeting once a week for the first 6 to 8 weeks of membership. So I can take a look at who has been mentors and who has been mentees. I probably shouldn't have gone all the way back to 2006. And while that's thinking, if you just want to go ahead and assign a mentor and a mentee pair, just click on Add New. Well, I guess I have to wait for this to stop processing. All right, so if I go to the mentoring program, assign mentor mentee, this will allow me to choose a start date. So this is when they'll start getting the emails. Now, just because you guys meet on Thursdays doesn't mean that you necessarily want to start the mentoring program on Thursdays. You may want them to start getting the emails on Mondays, for example, or you might want them to get those emails on Sundays. So choose which day you would like them to start getting the emails, and they'll get them a week at a time from there forward. Then choose who the mentor is and who the mentee is, and you can click Submit. And that will then assign those people as the mentor and the mentee. All right, and that's all there is to mentoring. Pretty straightforward, easy process. All right, let's see. Any questions on those operations before we move on to some of the reports? And I do realize we're getting close to the top of the hour here. We're about 5 minutes from the top of the hour, but there is at least about 10 minutes worth of stuff in reports that I'd like to show you. We had a couple more questions than we usually get during the first part of this. So Tom asks, are there tools to help the directors manage the chapters they manage? Yes, absolutely. There's a bunch of director level tools. I will not have time to go into that today, but maybe I'll start up a directors series and we can do that together. Would that help, Tom? Awesome. Tom, do me a favor, shoot me an email, support@bniconnect.com, and we can get something like that on the calendar, and I can work with your region on that. Cool. All right, so let's move on to some of the reports. So if I go to reports chapter, again, all of the things here are going to be read only. So it's just stuff that we're getting back out of BNI Connect. So we can never do the input. The input's always going to be there under operations. The reports will give us a bunch of information back out of the system. And there are a ton of reports here. So there's like 20 different reports. I'm not going to go through all of them, I promise. I'm going to go through about 5 or 6 of them that I think are the most important reports for leadership teams. That said, please go in and play with the reports. You can't break anything in reports. You can't mess up any data or anything like that by going into the reports section. So by all means, go through, click on them. If you have any questions about what they do, a couple of things. Email me, email support@bniconnect.com. We're happy to answer your questions. Or you'll notice that right in front of each of these reports is a little question mark. So for example, the chapter traffic lights report, which we discussed before, this is where you find the traffic lights report right here under reports. So I can choose it, I can run this traffic lights report, and I can get the details of the traffic lights and find out who has what in their traffic lights. Now, if I want to know more about the traffic lights report, I can click this little question mark, and that will bring me to the help document for that particular thing. So it gives me the exact calculation for how traffic lights are calculated. It also explains how each of these things. So before we had said conversion ratio, the number of members who have joined the chapter divided by the total number of visitors that have attended for that period. So you can also use these as teaching tools. If you want to print them out and use them as education moments for your chapter, that's a great way to do that as well. All right, so let's take a look at some of these key reports. Hold on, Marie says, does the report take into consideration the number of members who left in that same period? Yes, that's part of there's a different calculation for that. That's retention. So there is a retention rating as well. All right. So a couple of reports that are real important. Member training report. This is a great report, especially for secretary treasurers. One of the things that I just showed you is that you need to schedule the speakers into BNI Connect. Well, before you do that, you do have to make sure that the member has taken a member success program. That is a requirement. You can't do your 10-minute presentation until you've taken a member success program. So you can check that by going into member training report. And this is pretty obvious. I can just go in and I can see who's taken what kind of training. Or I can use this, show never attended. And if I go to member success program and show never attended, I can see all the people in my chapter that has not taken a member success program. And I guess our chapter's doing pretty well. We don't have anybody that's not taken a member success program. So great report for that. If I just want to see who has taken one in the last 6 months, for example, I can see that these 3 people have taken a member success program. All right, and it works for all of the other types of events as well. The roster, this one's a fairly obvious one, but there's a couple of sneaky things on here that I wanted to point out to you guys. The first of which is it's going to show you, obviously, all the people. This is the roster of everybody that's in your chapter. At the top, it will also show you who's in the various positions. This is really important, especially if your visitor host comes to you and says, hey, I can't record the visitors. How come I don't have access to that function? The first thing you need to do is to go in here and check to make sure that your team is listed properly here. So make sure that your visitor hosts are listed, that your education coordinator is listed, your membership committee or people are listed, because that will determine what they have access to in BNI Connect. The other thing that I think is really great about this report, and this is extremely helpful for the directors on the call as well, is this data in the last 90 days. So this is kind of like a mini version of the POMS report for the last 90 days. Why is this so important? The red flags of this particular report is you want to look for zeros. You really want to pay attention to people that have not given or received a referral in the last 90 days, or people that haven't brought a visitor, especially people that haven't done one-to-ones in the last 90 days. This shows that they might be struggling in BNI, especially if they're not doing those one-to-ones and they're not receiving referrals. When they're coming up for renewal, they may think twice about it. So keep an eye on that 90-day window to make sure that you have participating members. All right, so going down, I know it's looking like I'm going through all of them, I promise. I'm going to skip around in just a second. Membership dues report for you secretary treasurers out there, especially people on the membership committee. This will tell you when everybody is up for renewal. All right, so it's going to show you all the people that are up from renewal. At the bottom of the report, it's going to show you any new members, any members that have gone into late status, and any members that have dropped recently. This is also, if you're doing the renewal process in BNI Connect, you can also do the pre-approvals through here. Now, it's fairly obvious that we're going to be looking for people in the next couple of months as far as the people that should be already in the renewal process. But one of the things that is also really important is to look a little bit further out and to look for those people that are due in 6 months. So right now we're about to hit April, so the 4th month, add 6 to that, that's 10, that's October. The people that are due in October, in November, those are the people that we want to be looking at now, because those are the people that we can still help if they're struggling. So if you have somebody that's due in 6 months from now that maybe isn't receiving a lot of referrals, or they're not participating in the chapter, now's the time to approach them and offer them some assistance with that so that they have time to change. The people that are due this month and next month, it's just a review at this point. There's not much they can do to alter their behavior. So great thing to do with the membership dues report, look further out. All right, the meeting notes report. I mentioned that you can use this for helping members to give more referrals in your chapter. What you want to do is use this meeting notes report. This, I know there's a lot of chapters that always used to make one of these lists manually. It takes a lot of time and effort to constantly be adding and removing new members and taking out the people that aren't there anymore. This report is designed to go in and basically print out 20 or 30 copies, however many members you have in the chapter, and they can keep notes. What did people ask about during their 60-second presentation, their weekly presentation? Who did they ask for? Writing down the notes will help them to basically give better referrals. And if you don't like this, just export it to Excel. You can choose export without headers. And this will allow you to bring this out into Excel, and from here you can do anything you want with it. If you want to make the columns bigger or give them fancy colors or whatever else you'd like to do, or even be able to take notes electronically at that point. So it's a great report. The meeting notes report. Summary POMS report is obvious. It's just all your stats for the chapter. The thing is, you can actually choose any date range you want to. So you don't just have to choose the last 6 months. And if you want to show dropped member names, you can. This is another little hidden gem. If I choose show dropped member names, and let's say I go back a couple of years in this report, this will show me every member who has ever been a member of this chapter. So people that have not been to this chapter in years are in this list. Now, where this is really helpful is, let's say you're having a visitors day coming up. We are in the middle of member extravaganza right now, so we're all trying to recruit new members to our chapter. There's a lot of people on this list that have left in the past couple of years that might make good members again. Maybe they left BNI because their business was growing too fast and they had to go and take care of that. Why not invite them to come back and visit again? Go look through this POMS report and look at some of the new members that have some really good statistics and invite them back to your chapter. Great thing to do. All right, skipping down a couple, we have the classifications not in chapter and the speaker report, as I mentioned before. And again, you can choose, this is where you can choose, go back in time to see members that, I can go back even a couple of years and take a look at all of the members that are scheduled to speak or that have spoken during that time period. So we'll keep track of all of those people, when they spoke, how often they spoke, what the meeting date was, etc. The personal POMS report, if you remember that report from the home screen, the personal participation report, this is the same exact report, except you can run it for any member of your chapter. Again, very helpful, especially for leadership team members, membership committee members, when it's time for a member review. You can choose anybody from your chapter and you can choose any period of time. It's not just limited to 1 year. The member details report, skipping down a couple. This is great, again, for secretary treasurers. We talk about the speakers and you need to introduce your speaker for the next, for the meeting that they're speaking at. You can choose to view the member bio. So if the member has updated their profile in BNI Connect, you don't have to go chasing them down to fill out that piece of paper. You can just get their bio from here. This is the exact same bio that you'd be asking them to fill out on paper. But if they filled out their profile, then it's already up here in BNI Connect, and this is a nice, more printer-friendly version. And finally, going back to the visitor registration, we can go back and look at our visitor registration. So it's nice to have a report to see all of the visitors that are scheduled to come and visit the meeting, or to look at people that maybe never attended the meeting that were scheduled. These are people that you may wish to re-invite to the chapter because they hadn't showed up to the meeting. And again, this has some great detail in it. You can also go in and export this one, and you will have their full contact details. All right, so we have gone about 10 minutes over so far. Before I open this up to just all general questions and comments, for those of you that have some more time to hang out, I just want to show you one last trick. And that is, once you start figuring out what your personal tasks are and what your favorite reports are, there is a customizable shortcut menu that you can use so you don't have to go digging for it. And that's right here. You'll notice if I go back to the home screen and I go to My BNI Business, My Network link here has some of the My Network things. Remember to check the documents list because that has all of your regionally shared documents, things like visitor sign-in sheets, and if you're using like member traffic lights, or there's the categories report, things like that that are shared by your regional office. But right below that, you should see a link that says chapter. And what this is your personal shortcut list, and you can customize this to put any shortcuts you want there. So if I click the configure button, anything on the left-hand side is the stuff that's in my personal shortcut list. Anything on the right-hand side is all the other stuff that I have access to. Like, let's say that I want to be checking the chapter traffic lights often. I can put a checkbox in and now it moves into my active list. I can drag and drop it and change the order and put that at the top of my list, for example. If there's anything else, let's say the member details reports, if I'm the secretary treasurer, I want that up at the top of my list. I can then submit this. It saves it. And it should refresh the screen here real quick. And now you can see I have the member traffic lights report or the chapter traffic lights report up here at the top of the list. So I don't have to go to reports, chapter traffic lights, and then go. I can just go right from my chapter shortcut menu here and then go right back to my home screen without having to refresh the screens and dig through menus. All right. Tom says, is there a way to create a new header tab like director stuff? So if you're a director, you should also have region. And these are your regional level shortcuts as well. So this is everything under operations chapter and reports chapter and admin chapter is available under the chapter menu. Same thing for region. That would be everything under operations region, reports region, admin region. Tom says, oh, like just making a whole new shortcut category. I think that's a great idea, but no, that's not something that's possible at this time. Sorry about that. Definitely something I can add to the list. All right, so what I'd like to do now is to open this up to questions. Does anybody have any questions whatsoever? I'd be happy to answer those questions now. Just a reminder, this is being recorded, so you can go back and review this later. And you can share it with your other leadership team members or other director consultants that you think might get a benefit from this. A good referral for me, by the way, is to please let people know about these webinars. We do have a webinar tomorrow. Tomorrow, we will be going over the chapter web pages. So you can find those on your regional website or up on the support site. But tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel, we're going to be meeting at 3 o'clock Eastern time or noon Pacific. It's also 8 o'clock at night in the UK, I believe. So that will be tomorrow is chapter web pages. And the last one of the series for the month is the online renewal process. So we're going to be talking about that one on Wednesday. Let's see, Gracious, if I said that correct, says I've attended each webinar, but record the CEU on Wednesday and just submit for 3. So far it has been 6 today, but 7, but none are recorded. So again, yep, you just submit your CEU slips. They will go in as a draft until after your vice president has submitted the report, and then they will appear on your reports. So if they're not being submitted, please talk with your vice president or your director consultant, and they can help out with that. All right. Al says to please emphasize the meaning of a qualified visitor because it does affect the conversion rate. Yes, it absolutely affects your conversion rate. So a qualified visitor is somebody who could possibly submit an application and has been there and it's their first time in 6 months. That is a qualified visitor. So if it's their second visit, third visit, fourth visit, they are not a qualified visitor. If it is their if they're already a member of another chapter, it's not a qualified visitor. If they are a substitute, they're there that week as a substitute. It doesn't count as a visitor. They'd come back again if they were to be counted as a visitor. So again, all of those things will detract from your conversion ratio. Does that help, Al? Is that what you were looking for? All right. Do we have any other questions? So Tom says, well, what about if a sub is a potential member? So if a sub is a potential member, I would say when they're there that week as a sub, they're there as a sub because they're not promoting their own business. They're there as a sub for somebody else in that meeting. So I like to say that they can only wear one hat at a time. If they would like to be a visitor, they should come back as a visitor at another meeting and present for their own business at that point. Then they would be counted. All right. Let's see. Yeah, Tom, I'm not going to bring that one up, but I'm happy to talk offline about that. Al says that sometimes there's a better chance of them joining if you invite them as a sub first. And that's very true because sometimes that can break the ice. If they're going as a favor to you to be your substitute, then they like it. Then they come back as a visitor for their own business. Now they understand what BNI is about, and there's a greater likelihood of them joining. So definitely, I agree with that. All right, let's see. This one's kind of a long one, so bear with us. Marie says, probably not related to today's webinar precisely, but let's see. There's two members that the membership committee doesn't seem to be dealing with. One is our, I'm not going to go into too many details here. So basically the question is about when the membership committee isn't performing their duties. So they have a couple of members that they're having some issues with. They've reported them to the membership committee, and the membership committee is not doing their job. So what I would say is the number one thing that you need to do is you need to involve your director consultant right away. Basically, as long as all of the policies are being followed, your region will back you up. If that means helping to remove a member or asking a member to not renew or something like that, or putting somebody on probation, you really, really need to get your region involved with that. Your executive director needs to know about it, and your director consultant needs to know about it as well. So that is the absolute 100% first thing to do. That way, again, you'll follow all of the procedures and everything will go smoothly. What if you're having a hard time getting them involved? Then we can talk about that. We can talk about getting the next level up involved with that. So if you want to, I don't really want to do that on a webinar, but please send me a message offline, support@bniconnect.com, and we can talk about the next steps for that one. Okay? Tom, why don't you shoot me an email and we will schedule a time for a one-to-one, okay? Support@bniconnect.com. All right, any other questions? I know I've kept you guys on at least 15 minutes longer than scheduled. I apologize for that. There is a lot to cover when it comes to the leadership team stuff, and we could probably go for 2 hours and still not cover every single function. So, but that said, I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. So if there's no additional questions, I'd like to say thank you guys so much for being on the webinar with me today. Again, we'll be doing this whole series again next month, and this one was recorded. So a good referral for me is to please let people know about these webinars. All right. On that note, have a wonderful week, everybody. Happy Monday and happy connecting.